Or next to seating. You know, a place for a lamp, the TV remote, a drink, books and magazines, or anything that you want close at hand. So today we're going to take a look back at one of those small table projects we built a few years ago, called a turkey table. Now over the years we've tried and tried to confirm why it's called a turkey table. The best explanation we can come up with is that if you look at it from above, the three circles of the top sort of look like the profile of a turkey. Well, no matter what you call it, it's a small decorative table made out of heart pine, perfect for a lamp. Now, we found the original in the low country tidelands of Georgia. There it was, being well used in a private home, but its ancestry was uncertain at best. Although it's small and requires very little wood, it is a challenging project to make. The good news is you can still find reclaimed heart pine at a number of wood sellers, and it's a great choice for furniture. It's a very durable wood. It works and finishes beautifully and easily with polyurethane. Now, of course, a lathe will be needed to turn these legs, and there is some complicated joinery where the shelf meets those legs. Down here, where the leg meets the stretchers, that requires some carefully made mortise and tenons. But if you like the lines of this funky piece and the challenge of a small yet detailed project, this is the one for you. That's next, right here in the new Yankee Workshop. Today I come to you from the low country of Georgia, not far from the Intercoastal Waterway. We're at the house of a friend that's filled with antiques, but this is the one that caught my eye. He calls it a turkey table. I have no idea why, but if you do, drop us a line. It appears to be made out of oak. It has an unusual shape to the top. It sits on three turned legs that are tied together with some stretchers at the bottom. And it also has an intermediate shelf. It's just the right height for a side table, and there's plenty of room to store the magazines. It's useful, it's practical, and it's from Georgia. I think we should build a couple. Well, here it is, our version of the turkey table. Now, the one that I showed you in Georgia was made out of oak. I decided to make ours out of some recycled heart pine. Now, it's similar to the original in just about every detail, except how this intermediate shelf is connected to the legs. The antique had some metal pins that went into the leg and a flat piece that was screwed to the underside of the shelf. I've got a different method, and I'll show you that a little bit later. Now, if you'd like to build a turkey table, a measure drawing is available with the materials list, and you'll hear more about that before the program ends. Now, to get started today, I want to glue up some blanks for the top and for this intermediate shelf. Now, here are a couple pieces of 1x6 that I'm going to use for the shelf and the top. The piece for the shelf has to be planed down so that it's 7/16 of an inch in thickness. The piece for the top, because it's been sitting in the shop for so long, I'm going to just take a little bit off of each side to make it uniform in thickness. Now, before we use any power tools, I want to take a moment to talk about shop safety. Be sure to read, understand, and follow all the safety rules that come with your power tools. Knowing how to use your power tools properly will greatly reduce the risk of personal injury. And remember this, there is no more important safety rule than to wear these safety glasses, and of course, hearing protection when necessary. Now there's my pieces cut to rough length. I've arranged my boards with the most pleasing grain pattern, but before I can glue them up, I can improve the joints. The best tool for that is the joiner. A couple passes over each edge should take care of it. Now to glue up my boards, I'm using a glue that's relatively new. It's a moisture-cured glue. It actually cures with the moisture of the wood and the moisture in the atmosphere. You don't need very much of it, and it's self-spreading. You only have to apply it to one side of the joint, and as it cures, it'll actually fill the joint and spread all on its own. The base of our turkey table is an equilateral triangle. Therefore, the legs have to be triangular. If I was to carry the two sides of the leg out until they meet, the inside angle would be 60 degrees. It's also important to have the outside of the leg where it meets the rail be 90 degrees, and that accounts for the unusual shape of our leg. I'll show you how I cut it. For the first pass, I've set my rip fence to the left side of the blade, tipped the blade to 30 degrees, and I'm just going to knock off the corner. To clean up that edge, I tip the fence on the joiner to 30 degrees, and I'll just make a very thin pass. For the next cut, I'm going to take the side that I just ripped and jointed and have it on the table. I've tipped the blade back to 90 degrees, and I've adjusted the fence so it's about 1.75 inches away. With the same setup at the joiner, I'll clean up this side. For the final pass, the fence is still on the left side of the blade, but slightly closer. The blade has been tipped to 30 degrees, and I'm just going to knock off the outside corner. For the final pass through the joiner, it's necessary to tip the fence 30 degrees on the other side of 0. Now, before I can turn the legs for the table, I need to establish a center. And I found on the prototype that if I measured in 3/4 inch from the 90-degree corners and put a mark, and then connected from the 90-degree corner to the mark, where the two lines intersect is the best center point. Well, let's look at the turning. It's pretty straightforward. A straight section at the bottom and the top of the leg. Transfers into a bead, a little bit of shoulder, straight turning, another bead, straight turning down to a repeat of what I have at the top. Now I've mounted one of the blanks in my lathe and marked the sections to be left square. The first thing to do is to round over the center part to the maximum diameter using my gouge. Now that's pretty good. Next, I want to clean up the shoulder where we're going to meet the square part. To do that, I'm going to use my skew chisel. Now a little layout for the details. We'll just turn it on and make those marks all the way around the turning. And now I'm going to turn to my carding tool and turn each shoulder section to the right diameter. Now a little detail work with my small gouge. Well, while the leg is still on the lathe, I want to sand it smooth. Look at the prototype and you see that I have one more thing to do to these legs. I have to make mortises to receive the rails at the top and at the bottom. I'll make the mortises at my router table. I've set it up with a 3/8 inch straight cutting bit. I've transferred marks back to the fence which show the leading and trailing edge of the bit. I've adjusted the height to 3/4 of an inch. Now for the layout on the mortise, I've put pencil lines on the back side of the leg. I'm going to plunge the piece down right on the line, move it forward till I reach the back line, remove the piece. To make the tenons that will be on the end of the rails that fit into those mortises, I'm going to use the table saw, which is set up with a gauge block, set the right distance from the blade to make the shoulder cut that I'll have on each side. And the height of the blade is set at 3/16 of an inch. To form the top and bottom of each tenon, I just nibble the material away. The stop block is in the same position, and for the top rails, the saw blade is raised to 3/8 of an inch. Now I've installed my tenoning jig on the table saw, and this is really the ideal tool to make the cheek cuts on the tenons. It holds the piece safely while I run it through. To make the tenons fit properly into the mortises, I have to round over the top and bottom edge. So I just take my little dovetailing saw and just cut into the corner a little bit, and then take a sharp chisel and just shave it away. Now before I go any further, I want to spend a little bit of time working on the top. There are going to be several gluing operations to put the band around the edge of the top, and I want to make sure I have enough time. So first I'm laying it out using a cardboard template of the original that I made down in Georgia. And we'll cut it out at the bandsaw. A few minutes at my oscillating spindle sander will smooth and square all the edges of the top. Now I've switched to a larger drum for the larger diameter. Now I'm ready to wrap the edges with a thin band. This is a piece of pine about 3/32 of an inch thick and 7/8 of an inch high, and I've soaked it in water to make it flexible. And what I'm going to do is slip it in here, bring a clamp to hold it tightly into the corner, and then carefully bend it around, keeping it flush on the bottom. I'm not going to use any nails. I'm just going to clamp it in place and let it dry overnight. Oh, good morning. Overnight, that first band that I installed in the top set up nicely. And you can even see where the glue works its way out of the joint. And that's not going to go anywhere. Before we do anything else today, I want to install the next band. So a little more of my high-tech glue. We'll bring it around the edge, clamp it in place, and move on with the project. Well, let's take a minute to dry fit all the pieces together and see how they fit. That's pretty good. Okay, that's pretty good. Now I think I'll put a clamp on it so that it'll hold together while I do some more layout. These band clamps are perfect for these unusual shapes. The band will put equal pressure all the way around on the joints. Well, let's look at how the shelf of our prototype is supported. There's actually a notch cut in each leg into which the shelf will slip. Now, to lay out the notch, I've measured up from the bottom of the leg and marked both the bottom and the top. Now, to transfer or mark a horizontal line, I'm just using an old photograph. And if I wrap it around the leg, keeping the edge of the photograph even, nice and tight, that'll give me a horizontal point. All I have to do is use that as a guide to mark the notch. To mark the depth of the notch, I've clamped a straight edge across a pair of legs. And then I'm measuring from that straight edge and marking each side of the opposite leg. That assures me that the bottom of this notch will be parallel to this pair of legs. Now, to make the notch, I have the piece well secured to the bench so it won't move. A saw cut down at the top and bottom of the notch, and then I'll use a sharp chisel to remove the rest of the material. That's good. Now here's the blank for the intermediate shelf with the layout complete. Now I'm going to stay a little proud of the line. I can trim it down after it's all fitted, but I can't stretch it out. Now by simply moving my miter gauge to the other side of the blade, I'll be able to clip off the points. With the shelf dry fitted in place, I can now see that I'll be able to trim back to my original layout lines. Now there's one more thing I have to take into consideration with this shelf. In the final assembly, I'll be able to glue it to these back two legs because wood generally doesn't expand and contract very much along its grain. But across the grain, it can move a lot. In fact, it could shrink so much that it could fall out of the slot, and if I glue it into the slot, it could split the shelf. So what I'm going to do is install a dowel pin, which will allow it to float and not split. Well, now's a good time to jump back to the top and install the final band. That way I will have time to set up while I complete the base. These holes are for the screws that will secure the top. It's a good time to do it now because I can get perfectly straight holes at the drill press. Well, finally we're able to do some assembly. And I want to apply glue to the inside of all the mortises and on all the tenons. The tricky bit is that you have to get all the glue joints wetted before you can do any assembly. A little bit of glue in the slots for that shelf. Now remember, I said I was going to glue the two legs that were along the grain and leave the other one float. And the final piece of the base, the third leg. All right, I think I'll let the clamps do the rest. All right, well, this should be dry enough to work with in about an hour. Now I can install the top. You'll notice that I drilled some 1/2-inch diameter, 3/4-inch deep counterbores in the top of the rails, and that'll allow for some of the movement as the top expands and contracts with seasonal changes. Just attach it with some 2 1/4-inch screws. All right, a little more touch-up sanding and we'll be ready for some finish. Tables get a lot of hard use, and oil alone is not sufficient for the finish. Drinks get spilled on it and so forth. So I'm going to use a polyurethane. Now polyurethanes come as high gloss, semi-gloss, and satin. I'm using a satin polyurethane. I'll put on a coat, let it dry for about 3 hours, sand it with some 220 grit wet dry paper, tack it off with a tack rag, and put another coat on. Well, here it is with the final coat of polyurethane applied. I think it's going to give us many years of good service. I think I'll put this next to my favorite easy chair. It'll be a good place for the telephone and a good book. Now, once again, if you can tell us why this is called a turkey table, drop us a line. Next time, we're going to do something a little more challenging. We're going to build this Nantucket settle. Now, this is the one I built, actually made out of cherry. The original was made out of pine, and we found it in a private collection on the historic island of Nantucket. Next time, I'll take you there, and we'll build one right here in the new Yankee Workshop.